Ever wanted to know how a film that was so bad it's good, but somehow managed to gain a cult following over the past many years thanks to airings on Adult Swim on April Fool's Day, but also because of those midnight screenings you hear about, right next to Rocky Horror Picture Show? Then The Disaster Artist is the movie for you. The Disaster Artist. So The Disaster Artist is the latest film that tells the events of how The Room was created. This basic premise of it is that Greg Sestero and Tommy Wiseau, played by James and Dave Franco, are two aspiring actors that want to be in the business. As time goes on, that's when all of a sudden they can't find themselves any acting careers. But with a certain little event happening, and because basically they're just wasting time and they're not even getting any roles, they decide, why don't we make our own movie? Thus, that's when Wiseau begins to write down the basic premise for The Room, and the chaos from there ensues. The first thing I want to get out of the way is that the acting by James and Dave Franco are really well done. I'm not sure if it was like this back then, but again, I was pretty young when The Room came out, but pretty much how the acting goes by them, they do a fantastic job at it. Especially James Franco as Tommy Wiseau. I mean, that is pretty much the perfect combination you could ever think of. From what I hear, he actually did take into Wiseau's accent. I mean, from what I hear, he's done. He would listen to his recordings in vehicles, and from there, that's where he would nail the accent down. And for the most part, he does a phenomenal job nailing Wiseau's accent wherever he came from. As for Dave Franco, who plays Greg Sestero, pretty much, as you guys know, I have not seen Dave Franco in a movie since Nerve, and my God, that's like recently, like probably around the summer that I last remember him in a film. But it's good to see him portray Greg Sestero in this film. He does a good job bouncing off of James with a lot of these lines, and a lot of their acting between each other and how they play off is just very well done, and pretty much it's probably the best casting choice you can think of. But it can also be pointed into the fact that James Franco was also the one that produced and directed this movie. Kind of makes sense that it be sort of kind of like The Room, you know, where Tommy Wiseau wrote, produced, directed, and starred in the movie. So, kind of makes sense that James Franco would do that for the movie. As the story of The Room is probably the most fascinating I ever heard. If you guys ever taken a look at the book The Disaster Artist, I mean, it's by the same people that made the actual film, not Disaster Artist, but The Room, Greg Sestero. There was a lot of interesting things that went on during the production of the movie. And it was shocking, like multiple takes, like questionable scenes, and yet the most interesting style there was for this movie. Let alone in this book, and if you listen to the audio reading, Sestero actually does a very funny Tommy Wiseau impression, which really gets me cracking whenever I take a look at that little piece of audio with him, with the imitation. But anyways, Disaster Artist in of itself is a fascinating movie. It's so fascinating. Like, this room was basically made with mysterious amounts of money that was never disclosed. Wassau's origins are completely unknown. How they decided to literally buy both a film camera and the digital camera simultaneously has got to be the weirdest story I've ever heard of in my whole life. I mean, this movie, as I've said before, was considered to be so bad. Like, the Citizen Kane of movies. Like, terrible movies, to be precise. But after many years, it somehow managed to garner a following, probably thanks to, like, word of mouth, and especially the early age of the internet, but also because Adult Swim would air the movie on April Fool's Day. At least back before they decided to play an April Fool's prank by bringing in Toonami for the lineup. But I guess with that in mind, the basic question is, how does the friendship between both our main characters work out? Honestly, with both James and Dave as our two leads, it's a story about friendship. I don't know, it's kind of like La La Land, right? Two people come across together, they befriend each other and help them along their goals and everything. Here, they're two people they don't know about. Again, La La Land. But to some extent, they have the same goal in mind, which is where the difference comes in. They want to make a movie, but their careers are having a hard time trying to rock it off. And how they bounce off of each other and the ideas they have for this movie. I mean, even to the point where, like, Cicero wants to try and do something else, but Wassau keeps on reeling it in, is a surprising thing. And even Cicero, like, pushes Wassau to be like, no, it's perfectly fine. I mean, listen to your audience. They're loving it. I mean, and even, like, Cicero trying to explain to the crew just how Wassau works, or just how random he is. I mean, for Pete's sake, that rooftop scene. I mean, for Pete's sake, that rooftop scene took, like, nearly all day to shoot because he kept messing up the scene, or he couldn't even remember the line, despite the fact that it could be easily done. I mean, for Pete's sake. Even I could do it, but apparently it took this guy, like, all day to get the line right. Now, a major thing that this sums up is that, honestly, despite the turmoil that both Wassau and Cicero went through while making the movie, they honestly stuck together and didn't stray away from the path. That's what makes the movie special. It's about friendship. How long it can last, how strong it can be. I mean, even both Cicero and Wassau, to this very day, still talk to each other. And they didn't stray away since the premiere of The Room. That's how they both still communicate with each other. Overall, I believe that The Disaster Artist is probably one of the best movies of 2017 I've seen. Probably the biggest great casting choice, a really great true story that was brought to life thanks to a lot of great cast members and people who made the movie, and even the studio that won Best Picture for Moonlight, A24, which originally was Warner Brothers, but then American Distribution came to A24. They helped out to distribute this movie. And if I have to say one thing before I wrap this up, if this movie, surprisingly enough, wins Best Picture, that'd be probably the best prediction in all of history, and I will give it to you guys that quite possibly, if it wins Best Picture at the Oscars, I mean, the Oscars are quite boring as it is, and they go overtime like the Super Bowl, then pretty much Disaster Artist, in my opinion, if it wins Best Picture, I'm gonna drink a whole shot of a screwdriver. But with that in mind, the casting was great, the setting was amazing. Pretty much it's released during the Oscar bait season, so if it wins Best Picture, then congratulations to the cast and crew on a wonderful film based upon a true story that was written into a book that's based upon an actual movie that was released in 2003. And I will say that The Disaster Artist, and I'm not alone on this, is in fact awesome-tacular. Plus an added bonus is that we actually get to see, after the film ends, scenes that were used for the film, and then the comparison for the actual movie that was made. So, comparison between Disaster Artist filming of The Room between the actual Room. So, that's actually kind of funny. So, The Disaster Artist. Have you seen it? What you think about it? What are your overall opinions of the book? And, biggest of all, what do you think about The Room? Whatever your thoughts are, comment below and let me know. And as always, if you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, I gotta find a way to get off my lazy bum and actually get these end slates put in if you want to see more. And as always, I'm the Frub Guy, and I'll see you guys for the next movie.